What's up guys, Houndish here. Today we're jumping in to talk about Destiny 2, and yes, we're going to speak about the portal. I know, we've had a lot of conversation about this over the past few months, but there's an interesting discussion taking place at the moment. As in the last few days, Winter on X actually reshared a clip of David Canland, who previously was one of the UI designers for Destiny, and he's talking about how they built the kind of world map and the director and a lot of the core UI for Destiny back before D1 even launched. Interestingly though, he does speak about how they iterated from kind of a world map, the director essentially that we've known over all these years, into a simplified list, which is very much what Bungie have done with the portal, and they've realized that this is basically not the way that they wanted to actually build the game. So this is the original clip about how they would develop in Destiny UI.
And then we tried some where we actually got rid of the director as a whole and put in a menu just right in orbit, like this example here, so that you didn't even have to leave the page. We categorized everything. It's like, this is the strike for the week, this is the raid, the crucible, and all this stuff. And here is where we landed. We had basically streamlined the process, solved lots of issues, and made it absolutely easy to do what you wanted to, but we had totally sucked all the fun and cool stuff that we had in that very first prototype, and we realized that we'd somehow gone astray.
And so it's kind of fascinating that Bungie had already tried this iteration from having a director, which is more or less the world's map that we've had for all these years, into a simplified menu, which is ultimately the same as what we have now with the portal. And in a way, it's a good thing that Bungie actually built a menu like this because, as he said himself, it made them realize they already had something better, right? I think the quote was, "We had sucked all the fun and cool stuff out of what we had in the first prototype." And I think that's totally true. And in general, at this point, most of us probably agree that the style of the world's map director was so much more unique and clever, ultimately being one of Bungie's core successes with Destiny on a game design level, right? And obviously that translates into a more exciting experience for players as well. And when you think about it, the director has always kind of been part of the glue that holds these destinations and activities together, both on a gameplay level, but also on a thematic and storytelling level. As we've said many times, it gives us the sense that this was a solar system with worlds and mysteries. And there's a part in this clip where he specifically speaks about Jason Jones from Bungie pushing them into a different direction from having that kind of simplified list of activities. And some of the high-level goals for that being to incentivize players to be omnivores, to play various different pieces of content, but also to offer a sense of place, show past and future accomplishments, and to give direction to inexperienced players. And so before D1 even shipped, Bungie kind of realized that the world's map was the better way to do things. And naturally you get comments about Bungie unlearning things that they've learned in the past and making the same mistakes again. But as for the question as to why Bungie decided to go the route of the portal, obviously it's a hard question, and I'm sure there are multiple reasons. I think part of it was that Bungie see data that tells them some players, mostly very new players, but they don't necessarily know what to do right. But I think as well it was the hope that having kind of more of a bespoke set of activities would be beneficial for ongoing invested players, maybe because it would bring the focus in on more of a variety of the content Bungie have already made, but in that kind of curated way as opposed to it being left on the map and not necessarily being something you revisit years later, right? I'd also say it seems likely as a non-game designer, and I may be wrong here, but maybe it was also because Bungie chose to update the gear system with Armor 3.0 and the tiering system. To an extent, the portal could have been an alternative to updating nearly every reward source in the game. And we know as well that Bungie had kind of spoken about the portal before Edge of Fate even launched, as a way of slimlining their development, and they probably did think, let's cut down the number of relevant Fate-era reward sources, right, in order to make this gear update more manageable. And I'm sure there are loads of other reasons that the devs thought this was the way to go, but it does seem that Bungie were painting themselves into a corner with a lot of the systems in general. I feel like when they spoke recently about making too many changes too quickly, that was definitely true, and I believe Robbie Stevens had said that, but it's also clear at this point, and I'm sure Bungie recognized it as well, that it wasn't only too many changes, but some of them were simply the wrong changes. And Stevens also spoke about this kind of tax that they'd accrued, which is basically the additional workload that they have now in order to fix it, right? It is, however, important to recognise that Bungie seem to be aware of how big an issue this is, and that's part of the reason that their roadmap has taken so long to be released, right? The job is essentially bigger than they thought it was going to be, and they're taking additional time to figure it out. I'm sure that Bungie probably had some alternatives though. I kind of wish, and again, I don't know much about how games are made or if this is really possible, but I genuinely wish that Bungie had spent their portal resources instead on kind of updating the rewards from old sources, right? Even if it had ended up being rolled out slowly, they could have updated more recent sources like the Pale Heart, the raid and dungeon loop from the final shape year or something when Edge of Fate dropped, and then who knows, maybe added kind of expansion updates every season or something, right? Like, hey, Ash and Iron's here. Also, Witch Queen and Throne World is the new flashpoint for updated gear. Who knows, maybe add some new perks and glows or mementos or whatever. Just spice up those rewards as an additional component that ultimately means the game is all updated to the current system over time. And yeah, I think a decent number of players would have actually engaged with that. Could have been an optional, head back to Wellspring or go loot some chests on the Throne World, spend a few hours in there. I know some folks would complain about Bungie reusing or refeaturing content, but if you really think about it, it would more or less just be a better version of what they're already doing now, right? Because there'd be new reward incentive instead of old dungeon encounters dropping another duty bound or whatever. That's just my opinion, but maybe it's something that wouldn't have been feasible. Have to give me your thoughts about that below. It also seems another way they could have used the portal, as others have kind of said, would be to have it kind of be part of the director with weekly featured stuff perhaps, something integrated with the OG director itself, and early kind of iterations of something called Portal that we see in some of this UI are often kind of integrated into that map, so it certainly would have been an option, but the ultimate question now remains around how Bungie actually deal with the portal, right? And obviously that's anyone's guess. I do hope they kind of refactor it into the director and bring back some of the magic of things feeling relevant but generally more connected in the game. Moving forward, I suppose the difficulty for Bungie in a way seems that while the portal and the reward system was supposed to reduce work and resource cost in this new saga, it looks like they're ultimately going to have to get the job done properly anyway, right? And it kind of goes back to Robbie Stevens describing that tax they've accrued, because in the end it's probably a lot more costly than Bungie wanted this to be, so time will tell I guess, but give me your thoughts below. I'll run a little extra segment where David Canlan is actually speaking about the director and the UI right here if you want to check it out, but share your thoughts in the comment section. Hopefully we'll get some insights when Bungie do get around to that roadmap. If you've enjoyed the discussion though, a rating would really help us out. Also, if you want to stay up to date with the game, feel free to hit subscribe, but otherwise cheers for watching, and I hope you guys have an awesome day.
This was an important lesson we learned, is that when you're iterating and improving and trying to fix everything from the last iteration, you got to take a look at all your previous iterations instead of just the last one, because then it can start driving you in the wrong course. And Jason was the first to recognize this and call it to our attention. And while we'd accomplished this first set of goals, he gave us a few more that he really wanted us to work on so we can clarify the important things about the director design. So he said it has to offer a sense of place, give people kind of this sense of wonder, this really cool environment. It also had to show you your past and your future so that you knew, like, oh, look, Venus is unlocked, I can go there soon, and you can see everything that you'd done previously. It also had to display the dependencies between activities. So like if you had to unlock Venus before you could unlock Mars and so on and so forth. So it was the 11th hour. We knew we had to get this out like ASAP. If there's any producers in here, you were probably sweating bullets for me just thinking about the idea of making a major change that late. We're talking just a few months before we shipped. So we built a working prototype as rapidly as possible. We pilfered a guy from our web team to build a rapid prototype using CSS, HTML, JavaScript. And, like I said, we were out of time. Our specs were mostly complete, and we just didn't have all the details figured out, but we just had to execute. So we started executing. It's not optimal, but we had to move. Anyway, this is where we landed. We were very happy with the result, loved the design and the solutions that we landed at. It has kind of this mixture of sci-fi and fantasy, this ancient cartography look and feel to it.